Welcome everybody to Descubre tu Historia YouTube channel. Last time I spoke, in the last video, I spoke about the Spanish last name system and how and to give you an idea of how it works. And I did mention that I would be doing a video on what happens to our ancestors' surnames once they have come to the United States and how do they start appearing in the census records, like the census records or American collections. Because if you are doing genealogy and you're at the part where your family has come to the United States, you're likely seeing that the surnames, things get a little funky. Things do get confusing. So this is a video to give you ideas on how to search for your family once they've come to the United States, and think about all the possible ways that they may be appearing in the records because of the Spanish last name system, which is that typically we have two last names. The first last name is our paternal first last name, and then our second last name is our maternal first last name, because you'll see the video. I will link the video, I promise, so you can see the video then and then kind of go on to this one. So you're at the point where your family has come to the United States, correct? And you're having a hard time finding them, or you're finding people that you think might be them, but the surname is just not correlating a little bit there. So, and that's because once our family members come, because here in the U.S., it is hard to understand the Spanish last name system. They don't use the two last name system, and it can get very tricky. So, as you can see in the screen, I already have it up. So this is I'm using myself as the example here. I was born in Puerto Rico. I was born with two last names, Alicea Flores. But in records, this is the different ways you might see me. You might see me as Irisneri A. Ramos, where my first last name becomes more like a middle name. People will think it's a middle name. You will see me Irisneri Ramos, and that's because I'm married. And I should have mentioned I'm married, and my husband's last name is Ramos. So as I mentioned before, typically when we marry in my case in Puerto Rico, if we would marry in Puerto Rico, I would keep my maiden name. It just becomes extra a little long at the end, but I would still be Alicea Flores. But sometimes even here in the US, even though my legal name is Alicea Flores, once they find out I'm married and my husband's last name is Ramos, sometimes automatically I am recorded under his last name. And you might see this a lot in the census records. And in the US federal census records, you might see your grandmothers enumerated or registered under your grandfather or whoever great grandfather as last name. Or you might see me as Irisneri Alicea Dash Ramos. So these is just different variations. Or you might see me as Irisneri A Flores. That's my second last name. So which happens very often. So this is to give you ideas, especially when it comes to the women. But even within the families, when the men have come over and they're enumerated here, I have seen where I have a case where a family came from Mexico and into Texas, and in the first early records, uh, I want to say 1910 census, they appear under the second last name. So they're enumerated with the second last name. And so in my case, for example, my second last name is Flores. So they would be enumerated under Flores. And they continued to use, in this case, they continued to use in their records that second last name. So their descendants today, they carry the second maternal last name. And of course, once we started going back into earlier records and then into Mexico, we come to find out that their first last name was dropped. And that can happen. So look, if you're not finding them, and start to look to look in those different ways. I know it's a little overwhelming, and it can be, and I get it, but it's just things that do happen because the Spanish last name system is not, or the two last name system is not used here in the US. But even Puerto Rico, for example, if somebody is a veteran, and a lot of times, even in Puerto Rico, you might see the woman appear in in her husband's military records under his last name. So just an FYI. And other things that I've seen is, just like uh, alien case files, for example. And I will be doing a video on the alien case files and how you can obtain these. So these are files of people that arrived, I believe, after 1940. And through the National Archives, we are able to obtain their whole file. But sometimes, for example, the women, I have seen their last names also appear as with so for example, a woman, have a case where her name is Francisca and her last name is Molina, but her husband's last name is Hernandez. She was actually recorded in her alien case file for her alien case files under Francisca de Hernandez. So as you can see, it can be a little overwhelming. And so if you're hitting that brick wall, once you start coming over to once you start switching over to American collections, that's likely why you're hitting that brick wall. Because of the names and the surnames. Sometimes you're going to see certain names appear in the more Americanized. So like I have seen in my family, I've seen my great grandfather came from Puerto Rico. His name is Francisco, but in some census records, he appears as Frank. I have seen some Juans that in the census records appear as John. So just also keep that in mind when you search in the census records and or Johnny. I've seen Johnny too. So keep that in mind when you're looking here, when you have switched over and they're here in the mainland in the US. So I hope this helps. I hope this is able to give you a little bit more ideas on how to search for your family in the various records. So when it comes to the U.S. federal census records, we have up to 1950 census available. So in other words, we have access to that up to that point. Just an FYI, I can do another video explaining what they are, but the U.S. federal census records started all the way in 1790 until recently, I think 2020 was the last time we had a census record, U.S. federal census record. So, but only up to 1950 we have available to the public. So you are able to search all the way up to that point. For many of us, our ancestors migrated mostly around the 30s and 40s, but I have seen records where I've seen people come all the way, specifically from Mexico to Texas. I've seen them all the way to 1880. 1870. So if you are one of those that does go back all the way back to 1860, 1870, just an FYI, and you're searching for that 1890 census, it's not you. Don't search for it. 1890 census of was mostly lost to a fire. So you will, if you have gotten up to all the way 1880, that means you're probably going to have to jump all the way to 1900. So that's just another extra tip for you. Well, I'll be linking my other video of explaining the Spanish last name system. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate. Comment below. Let me know what other problems have you run into? What other tips you have? Other things you've noticed? Because I also want all of us to kind of come together and give each other help in helping others understanding, because there's just so much sometimes, and this is always we never stop learning. Any questions? Let me know. I'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.